I'm Randy Reid, Executive Director of the National Lighting Bureau, and welcome to our series, Let's Talk About Light and Health. Today's session is entitled Skip the Nap, Consolidating Sleep for Older Adults. I am joined by Dr. Mariana Figueiro, Professor and Director of the Light and Health Research Center at Mount Sinai. Mariana, welcome.
Thank you, Randy.
Well, we're glad you're here. And give our audience just a quick introduction about the Light and Health Research Center at Mount Sinai.
Yes, we are former Lighting Research Center at RPI, moved to Mount Sinai October 2020, and it's been wonderful. We're fully moved with a new lab upstate and presence downstate as well. So it's been all over, up and down New York, collecting data. So it's been really good.
Okay, and you're able to collect different data than you could when you were at the LRC, right? Different populations?
Absolutely. We're able to make a lot more contacts at Mount Sinai, and we're getting a lot of interest. I mean, it's been pretty amazing how I think people never thought about lighting, and then suddenly they are thinking about lighting, and we're getting noticed, and we're starting to expand to cancer population, Parkinson's disease. We're starting to look at working with post-acute COVID, so symptoms of PASC, what they call. So it's basically sequela that you may have for after COVID. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on.
And you see a lot of benefits being affiliated with a medical facility as opposed to university.
Yes. You know, it's interesting, Randy, that we noticed is that when we were at the LRC, we were known as the LRC or the Lighting Research Center, not as much as Rensselaer or being part of Rensselaer. Now with the LHRC, which is the Light and Health Research Center, we're much more known as Mount Sinai. So it seems like people do know the Mount Sinai name and like to know that we are, linked to it and associated with it. So it's been great. It's been really a great move.
Well, let's dive right in here. What are some of the major problems in the older population?
Well, two major problems, sleep consolidation. So being able to have an 8-hour sleep or even 6 to 8 hours sleep at night and less naps during the day or fewer naps during the day. So that's one of the main issues. And the second main issue, which we're also tapping into it, and we can talk a little bit about, is falls and falls risk. So those are the two areas that we're mostly involved with.
How does light affect falls?
Well, obviously, first of all, is the visibility part, but also we're working with horizontal vertical lights. So it's giving people perceptual cues. So think about night lights that when you get up, there are around door frames in bathrooms. And what we're being able to do is we're being able to give them these perceptual cues where they can lock their visual system into the environment, and that helps with the postural control and stability. So when you are laying down and you get up, you have something to get your visual system locked on, and that helps with keeping the balance. So that's what we've been working with.
But doesn't that harm the circadian entrainment to have that light while you're sleeping?
That's a good question, but no, because what we're using is low light levels, which is below the threshold for activating the circadian system. Okay. So that's the beauty of it, is that it gives you the perceptual cues. It gives you enough light for you to be able to see where you need to go, but it's not affecting your biological clock. So in a way, it's much better than turning on bright lights, because what you turn on bright lights are disrupting your sleep. And when you turn off those very bright lights, what happens is older people don't get adjusted to darkness as quickly. So you turn off, and what happens is that they get blank, it gets too dark, they can't see anything. So that's the advantage of having this constant dim light, is that you can still have the ability to see, and it's below threshold for circadian system.
You practically pioneered developing lighting for seniors to help them sleep better. Tell us about the genesis of your insights.
I have to say, when I was first starting in lighting, the work that was done by Joos van Summeren in the Netherlands, he was the first one to show the benefits of lighting for sleep in Alzheimer's disease patients. He has a publication from 1996, and he is in the Netherlands, and he still works with sleep, insomnia, and a little bit with light. But that was his. I think it was just a beautiful set of papers that he has, and he basically clearly showed that without the lights, Alzheimer's patients were completely out of sync with the day. They were only sleeping 2 or 3 hours at night. They were awake, then they were sleeping again. So they didn't have this consolidated sleep. He exposed them to, if I believe was about 1,300 lux at the eye. And the way he did it is he put them in a bright common area. So he increased the amount of light in the bright common area. There were some windows, and he didn't really paid attention to, well, what he did was all day that light was on in that space. So it's not like you have to sit in front of a light box for an hour. No, because that's very hard with Alzheimer's patients. It's really providing them a space that would give that amount of light, which is really the key of success in when you want to deliver light to older people, especially with Alzheimer's. And he showed a beautiful consolidation of the sleep. And I remember I was in the very beginning of studying lighting, and I was fascinated with the results. So what we did, and that's interesting, Dr. Narendran at the LRC was the one who gave us a little bit of funding to do a pilot study in a nursing home, because he was just starting working with LEDs. And we wanted to be able to test the blue LEDs because we knew that the circadian system had more sensitivity to short wavelengths. So we said, all right, what if we use blue LEDs? We don't need to have very bright lights. So it becomes more comfortable, it becomes easier. So we did a pilot study and we showed beautiful results. And that really was when we first started having the initial pilot study.
What year?
This was probably late 90s, early 2000s. Okay. Now, let me tell you something really interesting, is that Mark and I went to NIH, which is National Institutes of Health. And our pilot data had like 4 subjects or 6 subjects. It was really small, right? And we went there and we said, we got this really, really good results. We want to know how we can start writing proposals to NIH, just visiting and networking. I mean, I didn't know what National Institutes of Health was and how to get funding from NIH or anything. And the guy was very nice. He was a program officer there, and he was extremely nice and so on. But he looked at it and he said, man, you're not doing anything with 4 subjects. You gotta be kidding me that you're gonna get any funding with 4 subjects. But he didn't say it that way, but you could see that he was skeptical. But we persisted. We got our first grant in 2010, and we've been funded since. And I met him afterwards in a sleep conference, and he looked at me and he said, I got to tell you, I never thought you were going to make it with 4 subjects when you came in. I just thought this girl is crazy. And he said, I'm very impressed with what you have accomplished because you were able to show that it can be done. So it was interesting. And he was very, he was very kind about it and everything. But it tells you what persistence, and you got to believe. And I do believe, I do think that lighting can make an amazing difference to older people.
So what is the focus today with seniors?
Yeah, we have expanded. So we really started with focusing on obviously improving sleep. And then by doing that, we're seeing a lot of positive health outcomes with the improvement of sleep. So we're seeing better mood. One of the most significant results we're finding is improving depression. So you see a significant decrease in the depression. The second thing we're seeing is the agitation. So that Alzheimer's patients tend to be more agitated, especially the sundowning and so on. And we're seeing an improvement in that. We are seeing that there's a reduction in the agitation with probably the better sleep, right, that we're seeing. And now we're expanding to look at cognition, look at diabetes, because there has been some link between inflammation in the brain, diabetes, and Alzheimer's disease. So what we're looking at, and sleep and diabetes. So the way we're trying to link those things are, well, you improve sleep, you can then improve diabetes, and then you can then reduce inflammation and help with reducing perhaps Alzheimer's disease or transition from mild cognitive impairment to Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, so Mariana, tell me how that works practically. Do you find people with pre-diabetes and then do you test them and then you expose them to certain levels of light?
Yeah, there's a couple of group that we're studying. One of them is people that have mild cognitive impairment, so they don't have Alzheimer's yet, but they call it prodromal MCI or mild cognitive impairment. And what that is the people that have the mild cognitive impairment that are likely going to transition to Alzheimer's disease. And then we're also, they don't have diabetes yet. So what we're doing is we have a control condition that we basically expose them to very low light levels that are not circadian effective. And then we have the active condition. And what we're following them for 6 months, and we're looking at their metabolic conditions. So we're collecting what we call intravenous glucose tolerance tests. So it's basically you inject glucose and then you look at how the body responds, how much insulin you produce in response to that glucose. And what we're hoping to see is that you have an improvement in the metabolic conditions. And by having that improvement, we're hoping to see a delay into the transition for Alzheimer's disease. So that's one group. The second group we're working with are people that already have Alzheimer's disease, already have diabetes, and then we are exposing them to the light for 2 consecutive months and seeing if that light improves sleep, which then can improve their diabetes. And we're doing oral glucose tolerance tests, which is the same thing, but instead of injecting glucose, you're drinking like a very sugary drink, and then we're measuring their glucose and their insulin response.
And I assume you have more than 4 people in these studies.
Oh, yes, we have more because we're now funded to do more than 4 people. So we are collecting in one of them, the ones with diabetes, we're collecting 120 patients over 5 years. So that's kind of like keeping me awake because with COVID, it's been very hard to recruit. But we have a sort of a very strong effort here. We're starting to resume a lot of the activities that had to be stopped with COVID.
And this is upstate or in New York City you're doing this?
We're doing both. The one that we have to bring people to the hospital to do the intravenous one, that's downstate because we have the hospital there. The one that we do the oral glucose tolerance test, we have a nurse here, Barbara, and she leads that. So we're doing one here and one downstate.
So how does diversity affect this? Because I just assume in the city, you can have a more diverse population than you would in upstate New York. Am I correct?
That is correct. And I can tell you that, especially for diabetes, that, you see that people at more, African Americans, people at low income, they tend to have more issues with diabetes. And also the other thing is obesity, right? People that are more obese tend to have a little bit more issues with diabetes. And interesting enough, it's also lifestyle. I mean, people in the city tend to sleep less because they have longer commutes. In a way, you do have a harder life being down in big cities. And that's would be very interesting for us to be able to help that population as well, if we can do something for them.
Okay. So let's talk, some of the results that you have with circadian entrainment. What are some of the barriers to getting these things adopted?
Well, I think the major barrier is how do people get their credit card out and buy these fixtures? So in that diabetes study, everybody in the city that we ran the study, they stayed with the lights that we built and we put it in their homes for 6 months. All of them said they want the lights. They want to keep the lights. They don't want to return the lights.
Let's talk specifics. Tell me about these lights. Specifically, what are they doing?
They're delivering brighter amounts of light. They're not necessarily blue. You know, we're doing actually, some of our lights are 3000K, 3500K, but they're brighter. They just emit more lumens, and we're placing them close to where people are. So it's very uncomfortable to get everything from the ceiling, and you need an electrician to be able to retrofit things. And by having these fixtures that are plug-ins, it gives them flexibility to put in places where they spend most of their time.
So you're holding your hands like this. So this is not a typical residential type of fixture. This is something they mount on the wall?
No, do you know how we do it? We have microphone stands where we put, like, one of the earlier versions of our fixtures where wall washers,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
That we put it on microphone stands. So think of like a wall washer that normally is like that. We put it like that
On a
in
tripod.
stand. Yeah, and they sit next to people.
Okay.
So
Okay, I understand.
it's a way to deliver the light close to where they are. Now we're using these very nice fixtures, which again, you get a stand, and it's you know those Chinese paper lanterns?
Yes.
It's exactly that. And we just put a 3200 lumen bulb in it, and it's been extremely successful. I have 4 or 5 people in my department that wanted the lights in their offices, including my department chair, because they love it, because it gives soft, very nice, bright.
And at the eye level.
At the eye level, next to their computer, so they all look great in Zoom calls. So
Okay.
it serves many purposes, and it gives them a CS of 0.3 or 0.4. You know, circadian stimulus of 0.3 or 0.4, which is pretty good for daytime light. And it's very simple. So so what we did now, we have sort of a guide that we explain people what to buy and what to purchase and how to make their own lights. But honestly, these people just want to be able to buy, and it can't be $1,000 a fixture. It has to be cost effective, because a lot of people we're working now are people that live in the Bronx and just don't have a lot of money. So we have to give them the opportunity to have that without having to spend a lot lot of money.
So
So
I get
that's
you off track. To talk about the barriers to adopting this, your research.
the barriers are lack of products that they can purchase.
Okay.
That's just in a very, simple terms.
Okay.
That's the
So
biggest.
the industry needs to step up and begin developing these products.
Correct. And I think together with that, I think we need an education program, because I think, people need to understand what they need to do to be able to install these in their homes in a way that it's effective, right? So there's no point in you having a great fixture, but sitting, on the other side of the room and doesn't get to your eyes. So it's a combination of that. And we're working on developing a website with some of these tips. So Allison is, very proactive of doing that. And it's a way to teach people on how to install these things, but they still need to buy the product.
So when it comes to barriers, I hear some people that say they want to wait until the science is settled. What's your thought on that?
I think that there are applications that the science is very clear. There's one thing that nobody can dispute. We need bright days and dark nights. Okay.
Everyone's in agreement on that.
That's right. So let's just do that. You don't need to buy circadian lighting or whatever. Just think of bright days and dim nights, dark nights. We like to say bright days, dim evenings, dark nights. Okay. Just think about that. And if you do that, do it however you know how to do it. That's it. That's all we're asking. Now, do we need more data in detail, understanding individual differences, understanding mechanisms? Of course, and that's what we're working on. But in the meantime, we can improve our environments. And I am telling you, for seniors, I think we're doing harm right now by not giving them enough light during the day. And I'm seeing that because I go into nursing homes. These people are not sleeping well. And once you provide more light during the day, they start sleeping well. I mean, why aren't we doing it? There's no liability in that. It's like, bring them outdoors. Is that doing harm? No. So I agree. We don't know individual differences. We have a lot to understand, but let the researchers deal with that. In the meantime, let's just have bright days, dim evenings, dark nights, and that's all we need.
Okay, well, very good. Thank you, Mariana. And if you'll stay with us, we are going to open the floor now for some questions from our audience.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you all very much for joining us today. We will now open the floor for questions. We want to first thank our sponsor, Acclaim Lighting. Without our sponsors, we couldn't make this happen. Our next session is 27 June at noon Eastern. Fee, Fi, Fo Fungicide, Light as a Natural Pesticide with Dr. David Godori. Next, I would like to introduce our producer, Allison Thayer, and Allison will monitor the questions. Allison?
One question, Mariana, I see in the chat here. Can you just describe what CS is, first off?
Yeah, CS is circadian stimulus. That's a metric we have been working with and developing we started at the Lighting Research Center. We continue at the LHRC working with that. And it basically is circadian effective light, taking into account the spectral power distribution. So in other words, what color of light you're talking about, if it's a warm color or a cool color, as well as the amount of light, how much that reaches the back of the eye, and then how that affects one outcome of the circadian system, which is melatonin suppression, which melatonin is a hormone we produce at night in darkness, and it's a marker of the circadian clock. So it's basically a metric that tells us how that light will affect your biological clock, which is what we're interested in for improving sleep.
My question is really about those thresholds. So what do we know about the thresholds for circadian entrainment with respect to both the lighting levels and the spectral effects of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is still, obviously there's a lot of individual differences in what the threshold would be. So for example, the light history would change. So if you are in dark rooms during the day, you actually have lower thresholds. So in other words, in the evening, for example, you're going to have lights that are going to impact the circadian system at lower light levels. Now, we have done, based on our studies, and this is an average, of course, it doesn't take into account the individual differences. Like I said, I think there's still a lot of research to be done on that. But we have done some work in our lab, and we have been using as a threshold 30 lux for 30 minutes of a warm light source, say an incandescent type light source. So at a minimum, you need to have 30 lux at eye level. If you want to know how much that would be on horizontal plane, you probably want to multiply that by 3 or 5 times, depending on the type of fixture you're using. And you need to have a continuous exposure. So the circadian system really needs that more continuous exposure to see that larger effect. So we've been using 30 lux for 30 minutes. But I got to tell you, it really is about contrast. So it's bright days and dark nights, and that is really what entrainment is looking for. It's really looking for that regular bright days and dark nights.
Something else we have here, how is CS measured?
You can actually calculate it more than measure it, even though that there are some new devices now that allows you to measure CS directly, because you have to have a formula that has to go into these devices. So we've been working with a group called Blue Iris Lab. Eric Page, he actually have been developing a light meter that will tell you what CS is because it's calibrated for that. If you don't have that, what we have is if you have a lux meter, for example, you can measure the lux level at the eye, and we have a free calculator that you can online select the type of light that you're using, how much light you're getting at the eye, and you can then calculate how much CS it is. So it's a right now there are two steps. If you have a regular light meter, you can go to our calculator and calculate it, or if you have a little bit fancier meters, which I think they're going to be more and more common with the research, then they can give you directly CS measures.
So what about the specifications for lighting, and are there standards for mounting height for certain fixtures, or times that they should be switched on or off, and how long? Can we go over that again?
Well, to me, if you can, obviously you have to take into account energy efficiency and all of that. But if you can, you want to have bright days. So from the time you wake up, which the first couple of hours you wake up is the most important time for you to get that light. So if you only have a limited amount of time, pick the morning after you first get up. Okay, that's the most important thing. If you can have all day, sit by a window or go outdoors, the more the merrier. And then you reduce that during the evening hours. So that's the sort of the ideal scenario. But again, if you don't have that, or if you have issues with energy, 1 to 2 hours soon after you wake up is where you want that highest amount of light.
So if people on this call, if they have parents or grandparents that are either in their home or in nursing homes, what are things that people should be looking for and helping their own family members? What can they be doing?
Well, the best thing they can do is actually take them outdoors in the morning, get up, either sit outside on a deck or go for a car ride or go for a walk. That would be, I think, the ideal thing. If they are homebound and they can't get out, sit them by a window, put the shades up and sit them by a window and just enjoy the daylight. So that's the first idea. If not, then increase that amount of light where they're going to spend most of their time. So for example, with the Alzheimer's patients, what we are doing right now, we are putting the lights where they spend most of their day. So if they sit at their favorite chair at home, we increase the light right next to their chair. This way they are getting the light they need. So I think that to me, it's always doable and there's always options of doing it. But outdoors is the best one. Adding lights next to where you stay most of your day is the second best one. And I did see, Allison, it got out of the chat, but I did see that there was a question about, well, 30 lux for 30 minutes at the eye seems like a very low amount of light. That's the threshold, okay? That's the minimum amount. We don't recommend that. We actually recommend at a minimum a CS of 0.3, which would be about 350, 400 lux at the eye. So that's just the absolutely minimum threshold, is 30 minutes for 30 lux. And the reason why we come up with this threshold, it's really more for the evening hours. In the evening, you want to be below that because you don't want to disrupt your circadian system. During the day, the more the merrier. But again, because of energy constraints, we ended up saying, do it at least 400 lux at the eye, which will definitely guarantee that you're getting that bright day.
And are there things that people can do? Is it something where they can just change out the existing bulbs they have in their own space, or should they place it somewhere? So what's something they can do in their space currently?
Well, if you have table lamps that you really like them and you want to place them close to where you normally sit, you can just change the bulb, but try to get bulbs that emit a lot of light. So, you know, we're working with bulbs that emit about 3,000, 3,200 lumens. So that's what you're looking at when you look at the box and you look at how many lumens, that's what we're looking for. In terms of the color of the light, if you don't like the bluish white, like 5,000K, 6,000K, you don't have to have it. You can still have it. You know, 3,000K, 3,500K, that would be what they call the CCT of the light source. That would look warm color. But the key is increase the amount of light. Instead of one table lamp, put 2 table lamps, one on each side of where you stay. This way you're increasing the amount of light without necessarily making it uncomfortable. The other thing I want to stress out is you don't want to have to look directly to the light source because it will be glary. So you want to make sure that you, whatever you do, you have a shade that is, it can let the light out, but it's not, you are not seeing the direct view of the bulb.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit about it, about whether spectrum matters or if it's just intensity. So do you want to just verify that as, you know, if it's bright enough, then the spectrum doesn't matter as much?
That's correct. If you have daylight, for example, it is the light levels are so high that it doesn't matter what the spectrum is. Okay. If you go for example, 300 lux at the eye because you don't want it too bright or you want energy efficiency. So you may get a little bit more kick of the CS by going to a 5,000K instead of a 3,000K, for example. Okay, but it's just a little bit more. You can actually account for that by getting the fixture closer to your eye. That's a very nice way to increase light levels. Instead of having those fixtures out there, you get it very close to your eyes. Like, for example, I work in my computer with a fixture, the one that we talked about that we're using in our studies. I have it right next to my computer, and it's one fixture, one light bulb, 3,000K, and it gives me 500 lux at the eye. And I don't even notice it because it's so diffuse that it's comfortable. So that's the key. Make it diffuse. Make it, if you like warm, but make it higher. The light levels need to be higher.
So I have a nice question from George. Is a recommended light level taking into consideration the yellowing of the lens?
Yes, it does. So we did some calculations about the yellowing of the lenses, and by adding just about 30% in the light levels, you actually take that into account. Now, what's interesting is that one of the things that there has been some research saying that is there may be some accommodation of the light levels. So for example, when people get older, they get yellowing of the lenses, but it may be that your circadian system readjusts to that and becomes just as sensitive. So we don't know exactly how it works because, again, it goes back to the individual differences and so on. But that's why we have the light levels a little bit higher, and that we have also the amount of time a little bit greater. So this way you take into account the yellowing of the lenses, and you take into account perhaps, you know, smaller pupil sizes, all the things that happen with the aging eye.
And how about lighting, well, kind of switching gears a little bit, but lighting from computers or even televisions, does that affect it? Or is it not so helpful?
No, you know, televisions do not. We did some study, and you actually don't have any effect of TV. Because the TVs are far away. Even though they look bright, they really are not effective for the circadian system. Computer screens, iPads, because they're close to the eyes, they can add a little bit, but you need still a supplementary electric light or window or something like that. So it's helpful, but I wouldn't count on just that. That would be something that could add a little bit, but it wouldn't be sufficient.
Well, thank you so much, Mariana. This has been a great discussion, and thank you everyone for your contributions to the questions.
And we just want to remind everyone, our next session is 27 June, Fee-Fi-Fo fungicide, light as a natural pesticide. And you could register now to sign up for that, lightinhealth.eventbrite.com. Thank you all.